Continuing our discussion about the features of Indian society, we'll now discuss caste system. Now, what we are going to do here is we'll first look at some of the common features of caste system, broad features of caste system. But keep in mind that again, this particular phenomenon has been studied by different sociologists, anthropologists, economists, political scientists, etc. And again, there are different perspectives. So we'll look at some of these predominant perspectives. And then we will look at untouchability, which is again something which is practiced in the Indian society, though it is abolished by it's banned, it's abolished by the constitution and different laws. So this is what we are going to do. First, we'll talk about the broad features, then perspectives, and then we will try to understand untouchability. So let's get started. What are some of the features of the caste system? So we have a rough idea that caste system is a system of stratification. But what are some of the features within that? The first thing, there is some form of hierarchy. So the society is divided into different segments, and these segments are arranged in a hierarchical manner, which implies that certain segments, certain groups of people are considered to be superior, certain groups of people are considered to be inferior. So there is a hierarchy. Second element is, or second linkage that you can think of, caste and occupations, they have some linkage. It is the caste which typically used to decide the occupation of people, not the other way around. It's not that your occupation decided caste. That way people can take up any job and accordingly their caste will change. But that was not the case. You are born into a family. That family has a particular caste. Occupation is linked with that caste. So the caste that you are born into, that is going to be your future occupation. So occupation and caste, there is a linkage. Then endogamy is also another feature of caste system. Endogamy means marriage within the same caste. People who belong to a particular caste, they typically, when they choose their partners, spouses, they choose partners who belong to the same caste community. So this is again another feature, endogamy, within marriage within the same community, same caste. There are different kinds of restrictions on social interactions, how people should interact with one another. We'll see some of the details. In fact, for each of the points, we will be going into the details. I'm just giving you a broad overview of each of these points, and then for each of the point, we will have a separate discussion. So there are different kinds of restrictions on the way people from different castes can interact with one another. Can they sit together and dine, or can they share a smoking pipe together? So multiple kind of restrictions are there. We'll come to that. The caste system also imposes different kinds of civil and religious disabilities on people. At the same time, it also grants privileges and rights. So those castes which are considered to be superior caste, high caste, they will have different kind of privileges. Those castes which are considered lower in this hierarchy, right? They will have different kinds of disabilities. They cannot do this, they cannot do that, they can't enter into temples, they cannot access common drinking water facilities, common bathing facilities. These are different kind of disabilities that can be imposed. Social mobility. Mobility or social mobility implies whether the society allows people to move up the hierarchy. If there is a society, what are the avenues provided by the society for people to move up the hierarchy? Sometimes mobility can also be downward, but when we use the term social mobility, it implies that people's position in the social hierarchy can change. For example, if a society is there which does not really care about caste, someone who is born in a poorer family, low socioeconomic background, poorer socioeconomic background, but in this society, talent is something which is valued, hard work is valued. So that individual, because of his or her talent, hard work, over a period of time, earns money, becomes affluent. So that person moves up the social hierarchy. So this kind of a society the kind of society that I'm giving example of, it promotes social mobility. So the question is, if you have a society where caste is very important, caste is very significant, people give a lot of importance to caste. So is that society promoting mobility or not? We'll try to figure that out. Also, the society is divided into different kind of segments, right? So segmental organization of society is happening. Ascriptive hierarchies are there. What do you mean by this? Ascriptive means something which is from birth. So caste system is a system which creates hierarchies, and these hierarchies are maintained, and these hierarchies are maintained because of these ascriptive criteria. People are born into a particular caste, they cannot change their caste. Their economic opportunities are also linked to the caste they are born in, because you cannot change your occupation. Whichever caste you are born in, you have to take up the occupation of that caste. So there are ascriptive hierarchies here. So these are some features. What we'll do is we'll look at each of these features one by one. Now, point to be noted here is, in fact, when I was talking about some of these points, you might have thought about this, that some of the points that I'm talking about might not be completely relevant in the present context. Yes, I agree with you. Some of these points that I mentioned might not be completely correct in the present context. So all the points that we're talking about, these are all features of caste system. But keep in mind, as societies change, the different elements of society also change. The different features of society also change. Caste system is also changing. It's not exactly the way it was. Some elements have completely changed, some elements have not changed, some elements are in the process of transition. So what we will do is we'll take up each of these features one by one, and we will deep dive. At the same time, we'll analyze how far all these things are relevant in the present context. We'll do that. So let's get started one by one. First concept is hierarchy. Hierarchy is a core feature of caste system. So the caste system divides the entire society into segments. But all these segments are not arranged in this horizontal manner. They're not at the same level. Rather, they're arranged in some form of a hierarchy. Right? So this kind of hierarchical arrangement is there. Now the question is, on what basis this hierarchy is there? So this hierarchy is based on some form of deemed superiority. Note these terms, deemed superiority. This implies that certain groups of people, some of these segments are considered superior, some segments are considered inferior, deemed. It need not be the case that this segment is actually superior on some objective criteria. It need not be the case that this segment of the society is actually inferior on certain objective criteria. They are deemed to be superior and inferior. Just the society perceives it like this, or the communities themselves perceive it like this. So there is this deemed superiority, deemed inferiority here. Now, on what basis the superiority and inferiority is decided? We'll come to that in a while. In fact, I would point out here itself that there are different sociologists, anthropologists, they have all studied this, and you will find different perspectives on why a particular community is considered superior, why a particular community is considered inferior. Right? It's not that there is only one perspective. Also, there is another thing. See, let's say these are some 4-5 groups here, right? A, B, C, D. These are, let's say, 4 different castes, A, B, C, D. I'm not naming the caste, by the way. So there is a hierarchy here. A is considered to be superior than B, B is considered superior than C, C is considered superior than D. A, B, C, they are considered superior than D. A, B, they are considered superior than C as well as D. So there is this hierarchy. Now, does this hierarchy exist like this pan-India? Do you have A, B, C, D, this hierarchy existing in Kashmir, in Manipur, in Bengal, in Tamil Nadu, In Gujarat, do you have exact hierarchy? Again, these questions have also been raised. Some of the sociologists do not agree with this, that the exact hierarchy might not exist. But the point is, there is some hierarchy. There is hierarchy on the basis of deemed superiority. And mostly what happens is Brahmins are at the top of this hierarchy. And on what basis? On the basis of different religious scriptures, cultural values, they are generally accorded this superior position. Now, the question that you might have here is, all these communities that are there, they rank like this, right? All these caste communities that are there, they rank like this. Now, is there any possibility of any change happening? Someone may be placed at a lower position in this hierarchy. Does that mean they don't have any power? Does that mean they don't have any economic power? So these questions have been raised from time to time. And some sociologists have tried to found out the answer as well. For example, M.N. Srinivas, again, one of those prominent sociologists from India, he says that yes, there exists a hierarchy. This is a ritual hierarchy. Hierarchy on the basis of lifestyle, hierarchy on the basis of different kinds of food they're consuming, what kind of attire they're wearing. So this is what ritual hierarchy is. In fact, ritual hierarchy can be differentiated from what is called as secular hierarchy. Secular hierarchy means the hierarchy which is on the basis of education, power, wealth. That is secular hierarchy. So M.N. Srinivas is saying that this ritual hierarchy that is there, it might be something which is symbolic in nature. There can be some castes which are lower in the ritual hierarchy. Maybe they are second position, third position in the ritual hierarchy. But they might be having a lot of power. Maybe they have economic power. Maybe they have political power. Maybe they are the ones who are dominant. So sometimes this can also happen. Another thinker, Louis Dumont, says that the basis of this hierarchy is pollution purity. This is something which might be new to you. Pollution and purity. What is pollution? What is purity? In fact, these two terms, right, they are linked with one another, kind of opposite of one another. What Louis Dumont is saying is, the entire society is governed by the notions of pollution and purity. Certain things are considered to be pure. Certain things are considered to be polluted. Certain kinds of practices are considered to be pure. Certain kind of practices are considered to be impure. Certain kinds of processes, biological processes, are also considered to be impure. Again, by the society. I'm not saying they're impure. The society considers it like this. For example, there is a death happening in a family. Then that death might be considered to be a process which has led to the pollution of people around the person who died. And as a result of which, they will have different rituals to purify themselves. That generally, whenever there is this death in a family, you have like 10 days of mourning. And then after that, you have different kinds of purification rituals, Suddhikaran and all. That's the term used, Suddhikaran. What is Suddhikaran? Purification rituals. So death is considered to be an impure process. Certain kinds of biological processes might also be considered to be impure. If biological processes like by defecating, it might be considered to be impure. Now, certain kinds of economic activities can also be considered to be impure. Manual scavenging or leather tanning. So the point is, the entire worldview, if you look at it, how the worldview is shaped, certain kind of things are impure, certain kind of things are pure. Similarly, certain kinds of castes are considered to be pure, certain kind of castes are considered to be impure. And again, there is a relative degree of purity. Some castes are purer than others. Some castes are polluted than others. Those who are more pure, they are considered superior. Those who are less pure, they are considered to be inferior. And that way, this hierarchy is created. And this is all what Louis Dumont says. It's not what I am saying. This is how Louis Dumont looks at it. So there's one notion, one idea, that on the basis of purity, on the basis of purity levels, on the basis of pollution levels, again, the society is divided. Again, keep in mind, uh, this is what Louis Dumo talks about. Many of these things might not be based on empirical evidence, in the sense that, okay, something which you are considering to be impure might not be impure. It's something which is very, very biological. Death or menstruation, these are all biological processes. But maybe Louis Dumo thinks that this is how society perceived things and accordingly graded it. So this is how hierarchy exists. But over a period of time, ritual hierarchy might not be as important. Ritual hierarchy is becoming less significant. Why? Because of modernization. Because of modernization, you are exposed to different kind of ideas, modern ideas. People are questioning all these things. Certain things are biological. You are saying that it is impure, might not be correct. Also, people are exposed to different kinds of ideas, right? And all these pollution, purity, distance can't be maintained. So people are now more rational, more scientific, especially in urban areas. So ritual hierarchy and all these things are becoming less significant. On top of that, you have different kinds of democratic institutions now, right? You have modern institutions now, right? People belonging to different sections of the society, they all have equal say, equal power, at least when it comes to representation in politics. So all these things are having a bearing, as a result of which the ritual hierarchy dimension is gradually going down. In fact, some commentators, they will say that at some point of time, caste was completely hierarchical. Now, that hierarchy dimension of caste is gradually diminishing. Now, caste definitely exists. There's no question that caste doesn't exist. But caste is now more about different groups of people. The groups of people might not be hierarchically arranged, but there does exist something like caste. There does exist like different groups who know that they belong to a particular caste. They also know that, okay, the others belong to a particular caste community. So caste as hierarchy might be giving way to caste as difference. Right? So this is the first feature of caste system. Now, let's move to the next component. Caste based occupation. Caste and economic activity. Caste and jobs, caste and occupation, they are inherently linked with one another. Just now I was talking about how Louis Dumo looks at caste system. He says that whatever hierarchy is there, it is on the basis of pollution purity. So those kind of occupations which people practiced, which were considered to be impure, polluting, so those castes will be given a lower status in the caste hierarchy. While other occupations, which are considered to be pure, those castes, those people who are practicing those occupations will be given higher status in the caste hierarchy. So occupations are graded on the basis of pollution and purity. A Brahmin is mostly carrying out teaching, preaching. These occupations might be considered to be pure. While someone who is at the bottom of the caste hierarchy might be carrying out manual scavenging. The awareness who are considered outside the caste system, they might be carrying out manual scavenging. It might be considered to be impure. By the way, manual scavenging and all these things are abolished, but they still exist, and in the past it existed. Right? In the past it existed, and accordingly, a particular social status would have been given to them. A particular status would have been given to them in the caste hierarchy. So occupations were graded on the basis of pollution purity. Also, occupations were hereditary in nature, which implies that if you are born in a particular caste, whatever is the occupation linked with that caste, when you grow up, you will also have to take up that occupation. So occupations were hereditary and occupations were on the basis of caste. Some people will be of the view, or as I am talking, like you might have this kind of conception that it is the occupation which decided caste. Now, if occupation was something which decided caste, then it would have been so easy to dismantle caste system, because if you don't want to be in a particular caste, then you just change your occupation, right? And that way you just change your caste affiliations, right? But that is not the case. You are born into a caste. Everyone would have in that case wanted to be in a different caste, in a higher caste, but that is not what has happened. So you are born into a caste and you have to take up the occupation which is linked with that particular caste. But keep in mind that all these occupational gradations, they are also not always very concrete. It's not that it is very, very rigid. There are variations. So if you have that caste system, that let's say the Chaturvarna system, right, the Varna system, according to which there are four castes: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So Brahmins are the ones who will be the priests who will be carrying out teaching, preaching activities. Kshatriyas will be the one who will be having power. They will be the ones who will be ruling over others. They will be exercising that authority. Vaishyas will be the one who will be engaged in different kinds of trading activities. So this is how occupation and caste might be linked with one another as per the Chaturvarna system. But it is always not like this. There are many instances in India where you will find certain regions, certain pockets being ruled by those who are not Kshatriyas. Ideally, Kshatriyas should be ruling as per the caste system. Ideally implies as per the caste system, but that is not always the case. There have been instances where we have had non-Kshatriya rulers as well. Now the question is, what is the linkage between caste and occupation at this point? Does caste decide occupation right now? See, at this point of time, most of the jobs that we see around us, again, these jobs are created by markets, right? And the role of caste in deciding what occupation will be very minimal at this point of time. It is minimal at this point of time, right? So when it comes to the economy, the role of caste has gone down significantly. So modern occupations are more secular. But keep in mind that now also you will find some occupations where, again, people from certain castes will be there mostly. If you look at all these jobs which are related to sweeping, cleaning, mostly people who were considered to be lower caste, you will find people in these occupations. On the other end, if you look at temple priests, again, you will find concentration of people from certain castes. In fact, mostly you will find people who are Brahmins, they are the ones who are temple priests. Yes, there might be some exceptions. Once in a while, you will come across these news instance that in this particular state, the temples are being managed by people who are from the lower caste communities. But these are all exceptions rather than the rule. So, caste and occupation, there is an inherent linkage. Maybe over a period of time, things have changed. But now, also in certain areas, you will find caste and occupation, they're linked with one another. The third feature is endogamy. Endogamy means marriage within the same community. So, in India, caste endogamy is commonly practiced. Caste endogamy means people marry within the same caste. If an individual wants to get married, so how do they take that decision? What are all those parameters they factor in when they are choosing their partners? It is equally applicable for both male candidates and female candidates, right? If a male wants to get married, what are those criteria they look forward? They try to check first. Most likely, again, most likely it will be religion first, but after that, it will be caste. People take into consideration the caste of their potential spouse. And this is something which is across India. It is applicable in both rural and urban areas. It is applicable for people who are educated, people who are not educated, everyone. Now, you might say, okay, I'm making a very generalized statement. See, I am making this statement based on empirical evidence. As per data that we have right now, again, different sources of data, government data, National Family Health Survey data, more than 90% of the marriages, somewhere around 95% of the marriages in India happen within the same caste, right? So people get married within the same caste. And this is, again, pan India level, rural, urban. So this is what is happening. Now, what is the consequence of that? If people are getting married within the same caste, this implies that their entire kinship network, right? They're all relatives. They will be all from the same caste. The next generation will also be from the same caste. So the caste boundaries, they remain very strong. The caste boundaries do not get diluted over a period of time. And this is how caste gets perpetuated over a period of time. So caste identities remain preserved, caste boundaries remain intact. Let's assume a scenario where marital alliances are happening between people across caste. One person is from caste A, another, say the spouse is from caste B. So if they are getting married, the next generation will not necessarily have affiliation for caste A or caste B. But usually that is not what the case. Usually member from caste A marries another from caste A. And the next generation will also subscribe to the same caste. And whatever relatives they have, they all are from same caste. Right? So caste boundaries have not changed, caste identities remain intact. In fact, many sociologists, not just sociologists, right? Leaders also, political leaders, they also highlight the role of endogamy in perpetuating castes. They all, many sociologists, political leaders, they all say that in case you have to dismantle caste system, we need to promote intercaste marriages. That way, again, after some generations, the population that you have, they will not necessarily identify with one particular caste. Nowadays, a part of people's identity is caste. That is how they are selecting their partners, right? So if you are having intercaste marriages, so after some generations, people's identity, the role of caste in people's identity will be very, very limited. Two terms might be new to you. Hypergamy is allowed, hypogamy is not allowed. See, usually marriages across caste is not allowed, but sometimes there can be exception. So if a female from lower caste is marrying a male from a higher caste, that is generally allowed. So that is called hypergamy. So the groom is from the higher caste. So that way, what will happen after the marriage? The bride's caste status will also get elevated. So this is something which has been traditionally allowed. Generally, intercaste marriages are not allowed, but again, sometimes there can be exceptions. So hypergamy can be allowed. Hypogamy is the reverse. Here, the female is from the upper caste and the male is from the lower caste. So this kind of marriage is typically not allowed. This kind of marriage is called hypogamy. In this case, what will happen? The female is getting married to someone from the lower caste. So the female's caste status is now going down as compared to what it was in the past. So that is something which is generally there are restrictions around it. Now the question is, how far all these things are applicable in the present context? As I mentioned, now also more than 90% of the marriages, almost around 95% of the marriages in India happen within the same caste. So this feature is still persistent. And if this is persistent, caste boundaries will remain intact in future. It will not become porous and caste identities will remain intact. So caste as a kinship system by and large remains the same. Next one, restrictions on social intercourse. In society, you have different sets of people. There are different ways people interact with one another. There are different avenues for people to interact with one another. But caste system imposes different kinds of restrictions on these interactions. For example, when it comes to exchange of food, when it comes to dining, there are different kinds of restrictions. As per caste system, people who are belonging to different castes, castes which are at different positions in that hierarchy, they're not supposed to sit together and eat. In fact, many of you would have noticed these things when you go to villages. There might be a separate, there might be separate tables for people who are belonging to the higher caste. The lower caste members might not even be given a chair and table to have their food during different events, social functions. something that you might have noticed in Bollywood movies as well. Again, many of these movies, they try to reflect what is the social reality. Again, Bollywood movies not necessarily always reflect social reality, but some of these movies do. So there was one movie, Swadesh, right, a lot of years back, but I'm pretty sure many of you would have watched it. So there also you would have noticed they have, in a very subtle way, they have shown how there are different kinds of restrictions on social interaction. There's one particular scene where there's this movie. They're showing a movie in the village, and you will observe that how the upper caste members are seated and how the lower caste members are seated. Right there's a screen between them. So the movie screen is there. On one side, the upper caste member sit, and the other side, the lower caste member sit. And again, the sitting arrangements and everything is different. This is just one example. Apart from that, when it comes to exchanging of food, there also different kinds of restrictions are there. The upper caste member, whether they will take food from the lower caste members or not. If they will take, what kind of food they can take. They cannot take all kind of food from members who are considered to be lower caste. So multiple kinds of rules regulations are there when it comes to social intercourse. So it leads to limited social interaction. Now the question is, what is the situation as of now? See, there have been different kinds of laws. In fact, our constitution also bans untouchability. We have different kinds of laws. But despite that, now also untouchability exists in one way or other. Maybe it doesn't exist the way it existed maybe 100 years back, but it does exist. Right? You will find different kinds of tea shops where utensils might be different for people who are from the lower caste communities. There are different human rights organizations. Right? They list down the different types of untouchability which still exists. More than 100 forms of untouchability do exist. There are instances where members from the lower caste, they're not allowed to avail different kinds of services. Like for example, barber services. I'm not saying all these things are applicable in urban areas, but in some of the rural setups, these do exist even now. In fact, we'll discuss some of these things in detail when we discuss untouchability, maybe 15-20 minutes down the lane. Right? So there are different kind of laws which ban untouchability, but untouchability still exists. What I would suggest is, whenever you are reading the newspapers, try to keep a track of these kind of things. So you will find that these kind of things are very common, but many times, maybe unintentionally, we do not notice that. Right? So try to keep an watch over these kind of things. Right? How frequently these things are coming in the news. You will realize that these are way more common than we would expect. The next feature, civil and religious disabilities. See, within the caste system, different castes are given a position in the hierarchy. There is a hierarchical arrangement, and different castes will have different position. Now, not only the position varies, different castes are also accorded different kinds of rights and privileges. And at the same time, different castes are not given some of these rights. They might even suffer different kinds of disabilities. Those castes which are top in the hierarchy, which are at the top positions in the hierarchy, they are given different kind of privileges. They have different kinds of rights. Right to carry out different kinds of religious practices, maybe cultural practices, maybe. On the other hand, you will find those castes which are placed at the bottom of the hierarchy. They face different kinds of restrictions. For example, certain communities at the bottom, they're considered to be untouchables. They are they have been traditionally denied entry into temples. They're not allowed to carry out different kinds of rituals. In the past, they were not allowed to construct pakka houses. There have been instances where members from the Dalit community, members from the community which were considered to be untouchables, they were not allowed to access drinking water facilities, common drinking water facilities, different kinds of other facilities like bathing facilities, common bathing facilities. So these kind of restrictions have been there. There have been instances where there were separate schools, separate wells for members. So all these things are different disabilities imposed by the caste system. But the question is it something which continues? See, if you look at the Indian state, The Indian state it prohibits untouchability, it abolishes untouchability. It is considered to be a criminal offense as well, right? Uh, all these practice of all these things. But despite that, uh, it is practiced in different pockets, right? It is not something which has been completely abolished. It does continue to exist in some places. So law has not been able to solve the entire problem. A large part of the problems lies at the societal level. Next element is social mobility. Now, what is social mobility or what is mobility? Mobility here does not mean physical movement, right? When we use the term mobility, when we talk about urban areas, when we talk about traffic problems, here it means movement from one position to another, right? Physical movement. That's what we are not talking about. What we are saying is, or what social mobility implies is, if let's say there is a society where you have hierarchy. Keep in mind, hierarchy exists everywhere. What kind of hierarchy exists varies, but hierarchy exists everywhere, right? Even if you go to some of these developed economies, right, United States or some of these European countries, there also you'll have hierarchy. Maybe the hierarchy is in terms of wealth. Some people are extremely rich, some people are in the middle classes, some people are poor. So everywhere you have hierarchy. Now social mobility implies that people can move up and down along the hierarchy. If that is allowed, then the society has some amount of mobility. But there can be societies where there is no mobility. It is very difficult for people to change their position in the societal hierarchy. So, if there is a society where caste system is valued a lot, everyone adheres to caste system. People over there, everyone follows the caste system. That society will not have enough amount of mobility. It will not have enough, not just enough amount of mobility, it will not have mobility. Why do I say this? Caste system implies people are born into a particular caste. It is hereditary in nature. Also, caste and occupation, they are linked with one another. Occupation is something which gets you money, right? It is your source of income. So you might be someone who is extremely talented. You can do bunch of things. You can do things which are much more productive. But what you can do, you can only do those things which your caste allows you to do in a caste society, right? So maybe you could have become an expert goldsmith. You have talent for that. But you are born in the caste of farmers, let's say, peasants maybe. So what will happen? You will be carrying out farming activity. You cannot become a goldsmith. So your talent is wasted. So a caste-based society is a closed system. It does not offer you different kinds of economic opportunity. It does not offer you flexibility. Now, question is, how does the present society look like? Just think about it. Is it some here? Are you necessarily limited by your caste? Not necessarily. You might be born in a particular caste, but you can take up any occupation, right? So, at the present, the role of caste in deciding your occupation has gone down massively, though there are some restrictions. But if there is a society, especially in rural areas, this is the case, right? In rural areas, caste might be given a lot of significance, and the amount of mobility in those societies tends to be limited. Now, caste as a closed system, this has also been challenged by some sociologists, right? For example, thinkers like M.N. Srinivas, sociologists like M.N. Srinivas, they've pointed out that yes, caste is a closed system, but it does offer some amount of mobility. It has also offered some amount of mobility. So, what Srinivas is saying is there have been instances where people who were born in some castes, which were not necessarily at the top of the hierarchy, maybe it was somewhere in the middle, but through a process of Sanskritization, which we'll come to later, they were able to move up the caste hierarchy. They were able to improve their position along the caste hierarchy. So, this shows that there is some amount of mobility in the caste system itself. So, what Srinivas is saying is there have been communities born at a relatively lower position in the caste hierarchy, But over a period of time, what they did was they tried to copy the different kinds of lifestyle practices of people of the higher caste. And gradually, their position in the caste hierarchy improved. This process is called Sanskritization. If you want to know more, you can again search it further. But yeah, for general studies purpose, we might not need more information on this. Just keep in mind that Sanskritization is a process by which people from middle caste or lower caste, they try to emulate the lifestyle of the upper caste. And in this process, over generations, with time, the position of the caste improves. Also, sometimes some castes, they get royal patronage. So those who are in power, they might support them. So there is royal patronage, as a result of which your position in the caste hierarchy also change. Conversions can also lead to change in your position. And in fact, there are instances where people who would have been accorded a lower caste in the caste hierarchy, they have converted to other religions, maybe to Buddhism, maybe to Islam, to Christianity, to have a better social status maybe. Census, how the census officials record your caste, that can also have a role, and it can also lead to social mobility. These are some elements of social mobility. The next one, segmental organization. Already I talked about this. As per the caste system, the entire society is divided into segments, and some of these segments can be further divided into subsegments. You have the entire society divided into different castes. The castes can be further divided into subcastes. The subcastes can be further divided into sub-subcastes. So this can go on. So, for example, society might be divided into Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. Within Brahmins, again, there might be subcastes here. Different kinds of Brahmins can be there. Among Kshatriyas, also different kinds of Kshatriyas can be there, which can be further divided into components. So society is divided into segments. Last criteria or last feature, caste system is a system of ascriptive hierarchies. Ascriptive means something from birth. So the hierarchy that is created, it is created because of birth, right? So, or because of the process of birth or phenomenon of birth. So some people are accorded higher status, some people are accorded lower status. Why some people are accorded higher status? Because they are born into a caste which is already accorded a higher status. So if there is a caste which is considered to be superior, whoever is born into families who are of the superior caste, they will be accorded higher status. Someone is born into a caste which is accorded lower status, they will continue to have lower status. So these hierarchies are from the birth, right? So caste is assigned at birth and it remains more or less same throughout the life. And it operates in a closed fashion. This is something that we already talked about. So these are all features of the caste system. And these are all, again, features which most of the sociologists will agree upon. So 7, defining features. Now, the question is, see, we have mentioned that there is superiority, there is inferiority, and there is some form of hierarchy. But how is this hierarchy formed? On what basis? Is this hierarchy uniform throughout the length and breadth of the country? Is this hierarchy same throughout with time, or does it change? So these are some questions that need to be thought through, right? These questions need to be answered. In fact, they have been answered by multiple researchers. What we will do next is we'll look at how different researchers have viewed these things, right? And we'll look at some 4 or 5 researchers, how they have looked at these hierarchies, on what basis these hierarchies are formed, what has been their primary method, what has been their major contribution. And we'll look at that. Now, we are not going to deep dive here because in general studies, that is what is not required. But what we will do is we'll try to have a flavor of each of these things. This will get you to understand how the understanding of caste system has changed over a period of time. And keep in mind, some of these viewpoints might clash with one another. And again, that is perfectly fine, right? Because sometimes what will happen is, yes, a researcher would have based his findings on the basis of some criteria. But over a period of time, new data came up, new evidence came up, new methods came up. As a result of which the finding, a new kind of finding came up. and there might be some form of conflicts. Don't worry about that. What is important is understanding the different perspectives, different viewpoints. As civil service aspirants, right, we need to have a holistic picture of different phenomena. And that's what we are trying to do here.